I love any level of thinking that re-engages my heart and my mind as it relates to the Scripture, the church, and narrative. And I think that's what's so great about this conversation, is that I read the Scriptures in a way that I think within certain frameworks has not been possible because of previous commitments.
Among scholars, and I think some of the people that will be at this conference, there's been a lot of discussion. Jesus and Paul, are they friends or foes? And people have wanted to say, yes, there is a difference. But a lot of New Testament scholars have said, no, there's not such a great difference. But part of that is caught up in a rereading of Paul.
I love the Scriptures, I love the church, and I love narrative. And I think for me, on a personal level, I just get excited when those worlds come together. The church, the Scriptures, and narrative. Now, it's ironic that I would have to say that, right? That those things would somehow not be connected to one another. And yet, strangely, they haven't.
I think it's a great title for the conference, Reclaiming Paul. And yet the notion that some of the critics of Emergent have offered that, we really have ignored Paul, there's something somewhat disingenuous about that, because if you look at the way, for instance, a thinker like N.T. Wright has been a very generative thinker for emergence, and he's certainly engaged with Paul, that I sometimes can feel like what folks are criticizing, what the nature of the criticism really is, here's a certain portrait of Paul that we think is the right one. They're obviously not doing that, therefore they're not engaged with Paul.
Right.
When in fact it's a different type of engagement. So I think that this is where clarifying some of those questions and having an event like this is really going to be fantastic.
A gift of someone like N.T. Wright, with some of the work he did and the way that affected me early on in my growth, was that I felt like he was giving me back a Bible I never knew I had. And in that sense, it's like a process of discovery and excitement. It's almost like the ongoing process of conversion.
Echoing that, the other thing, and it's similar, is that the framing of this conference, the shape of it, and the interactions is a profound reminder that the Bible is a book for the church. It can be studied in great depth by scholars who can offer wonderful insights, but it is for the church and for the church's mission.
I think one of the things that a lot of us are feeling relative to churches, and this is from a position of profound love and affection and desire for the church to be what God has called it to be, is that in some ways the church has been domesticated. And I think if that has in fact been the case, then you say, well, then what is the source material by which it's getting its narrative? And if indeed Jesus has been domesticated, yes, and Paul has been domesticated, in other words, read within a certain framework that has limited the possibilities of what we really can find there, then I think it was only a matter of time before the church becomes domesticated.
I think an event like this will be a reminder in calling all of us to realize the significance of Scripture for the mission of God.